Live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We got a great guest. Two ways you can get a hold of the show. First, subscribe to the YouTube channel by going to Zach Ballinger. You can find all these live events going on throughout the week. You can schedule in, tune in, ask your comments and questions into the comment box. Also, email me, Zach at zachballinger.com. You can find all of the videos there, as well as ask any questions for our guests before the show. Without further ado, James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so James, we're going to jump right in. We want to know what you do career-wise.
Yeah, so I am a headhunter. That's a pretty simple way of putting it. I got involved in the recruiting industry it's been about 7 or 8 years ago, and just ended up making a career out of it.
You know, a lot of people ask me about working with recruiters. That's probably the number one thing people do. You know, can you walk us through that? What type
Yeah.
of clients are you typically looking for? How do you get plugged in with a recruiter if you're out there looking for a job?
Okay, so first we want to define, clients a little bit from our side. So our clients are technically the businesses, right? On the candidate side, on the professional side, usually it all depends on what the recruiter is doing, how they are specializing. So for me, I work in the building materials industry, and we work with sales and operations individuals most of the time. And so for professionals, it's really about getting with a recruiter or partnering yourself with a recruiter or a couple of different recruiters that are either industry specific, functionally specific, or location specific. And preferably you want all three, right? But that's really, if you're a professional and you haven't ever worked with a recruiter before, or you're new to it, or it's been a while, that's really where I would start.
Gotcha. Now, how did you get in this industry? It's a pretty unique profession. How did you
Yeah.
become a recruiter?
So it's not a Cinderella story necessarily. I had graduated in 2013, and I was doing some summer work. I happened to, being applying for different jobs around here. I didn't know recruiting was a thing. I didn't know it was an industry. I didn't know anything about it, but I had a local firm here take some interest in bringing me in as an assistant. So I was brought in as an assistant. I think it was a 90-day contract. Got hired on full time. Ended up being a recruiter for about 2 years with them. Moved over to a traditional agency where I ran a 360 desk for about 2 years, and then went off on my own and started our own brand.
Now, what is a day like? You know, I know it's so hard for professionals because it changes every day for all of
Mhm.
us, but I encourage my audience to do virtual or either live in person when the coronavirus is over, is job shadowing or internships or something like that. If
Mhm.
somebody had to jump into a day with you and they started off the morning having a cup of coffee and then they left the office, what does a typical day look like for you?
So for me, it's a little bit different than a average headhunter, because I'm in a position where I'm having to do a little bit more marketing, a little bit more social media, some of the more higher level stuff, I guess you'd say. If you were with a traditional recruiter, what they're going to do is, and it's a full desk recruiter, meaning they develop their own business and they find their own candidates. Usually what they do is they split up their day into two halves. You've got your business development half, or your sales half, and then your candidate half. Now within, let's just say it's an 8-hour day and we're splitting it 4 and 4, I would say probably you're going to want 2 to 3 hours of each one of those blocks to be spent on the phones live with the people that you're going to be speaking with. The best in the business always say plan your work and work your plan, right? And so that's usually what newbies or new people need to focus most on, is not having downtime during the day and really just staying active. Jordan Rayboy, kind of a veteran from the industry, always said, if you're not on the phone, you're not open for business, because we don't have, or a lot, 95% of folks, it's not a storefront situation. You're doing business when you're on the phone with somebody, when you're cultivating a relationship. So if somebody was to shadow, it probably wouldn't be very exciting unless there's maybe some in-person meetings, because a lot of it is just calling. It's calling, having conversations, and building relationships.
Yeah, I'd say one thing about your career, and correct me if I'm wrong, the pandemic didn't really, I mean, you before the pandemic, you were still making all these telephone calls because what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is you're looking for candidates, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That a
Right.
company wants. So I'm sure it changed a little bit, but you're still on the phone a lot.
Yeah, for me, it didn't functionally change too much. I know, obviously, your face-to-face meetings and your handshake ratio kind of goes down a little bit. But our industry got a little shaken up maybe March, April, May of last year, which didn't mess with us too much. But more often you're hearing, "Oh, we're on a hiring freeze. We're not doing this, we're not doing that." Functionally, the job never changed really, and I think that ultimately COVID and the whole macro situation really helped the people that were continuing to push during that situation. Because I'm kind of the volition where, hey, if everybody else is slowing down, then you should speed up. So that's really, it actually ended up helping our business because a lot of people were taking their foot off the gas pedal.
Gotcha. Now, what do you love about your job? What are you passionate about? What kind of gets you going?
So I love that it's a people-oriented business, right? And I love that the freedom that comes with it. And that's not just for recruiting; it's for a lot of sales type positions. But I mean, I like that. And I like the industry we work in. I like the building materials, construction industries. My degree is actually in real estate development. It's more so I like the people. I like the function of the job. I like the people that I work with. I like being able to really create a win-win situation. You're taking somebody that may have been in a job and happy and working, but you're showing them an opportunity that's going to help them develop their career long term. Meanwhile, you're helping a business or a manager or a hiring manager improve their business or their team. It ends up being a win-win all around. So it's nice that it's an opportunity and it's a job that's people focused. We're worried about making sure that everyone's improving long term, and so that's kind of what I like about it.
Awesome. And on the flip side, this might be a tough question. Other people can answer it with ease. But what's some of the difficulty behind your job or some of the things that people need to know about that makes it
Oh
challenging?
yeah, man, I could go on all day about some difficulties. Why not? Why not? We could do another episode. No, the difficulties. So I always tell new recruiters, because we're in a lot of different associations and networks, and you always have people come in getting very excited about the job because it is cool. I mean, you're recruiting, it's live, you're dealing with people, but at the same time, you're dealing with people, right? So if you're doing your job in a not sophisticated way, if you're trying to put a round peg or a square peg in a round hole and trying to force things, you're going to end up very unhappy because what happens is, let's say you just keep telling this candidate, oh, we'll just do the interview, see what you like, whatever. And you get them into a third round interview, a fourth round interview, and they decline an offer. Or you get a skeptical candidate and they get an offer and they accept the counter offer. Or there's a million different things that can grind your gears if you're not really expecting them. And especially on the business development side, not a lot of people are used to calling somebody that's not expecting your call. They're not used to trying to actively sell something during a new relationship. Some people get worried about the level of the people that they're calling. Like, oh man, I'm talking to a VP at a Fortune 500 company. Some people feel imposter syndrome. So it's really, when it comes to the difficulties, there's lots of difficulties, but it's easy to manage them if you know up front. Now, me and a lot of other recruiters, sometimes you got to burn your hand on the stove a couple times, but it's nothing that would want to boot you out of the industry if you've got kind of tough skin.
Now, this is one of the questions that came in, and now that we're just talking about this, I kind of want to get your intake on this. Somebody asked, "Do recruiters have your best interest in mind?" And I think what they meant by that is, do they try to sell you on a particular job if you're
Mhm.
not qualified for it, or do you? And you may have a different philosophy than other recruiters, but I know, do recruiters get compensated just for having a candidate in the interview process? And
Mhm.
so some of the people were asking about that. I wanted to know if you could clarify that.
So that's all going to be situation dependent, especially whenever we're talking about bigger companies. Some companies will pay a bonus for interviews. A lot of recruiting agencies, the KPI or the key performance indicators that they measure include interviews. So yes, in certain metric heavy businesses, um, they're incentivized to basically get more people out to interview. So there's going to be the good side of that and the bad side of that. There's going to be people that will upfront tell you, what the role is and everything, and kind of give you a transparent look. But then maybe there's some people out there that want are more worried about their metrics, and they're more worried about saving their own tail and all this. Me being independent, I know that if this isn't the right opportunity for you, it's going to bite all three of our butts in the end. My company or my client is not going to be happy with me. You're not going to be happy with me. And I'm going to have to start all that work over. So I am, because I'm independent and I'm not focused on simply metrics or KPIs, it gets you into a position where we want to make sure we're incentivized to make sure you stay there long term, to make sure that it's the right opportunity. Kind of like what I was talking about before in challenges where people fall out late in the process. Well, I know because I've heard of candidates where they don't hear the compensation levels, and maybe they get lowballed once an offer comes out. Well, I know on my end, if if my client's planning on lowballing, chances are you're going to decline, right? And I'm wasting all this time. If I only care about getting the interview or getting the KPI or getting of the offer, then that's one thing, right? But I still think that whenever it comes to just being honest up front about the opportunity, about the uh, compensation levels, about what the expectations are, and not only from the company side, but more so from the candidate side. I always want to ask, okay, what's one thing that you would change about your current opportunity or environment if given the chance, or what is something that you're not doing right now that you wish you were doing, or being transparent about what their compensation requirements are. A good recruiter is going to want to find out everything about what your situation is currently like and what you want to do in the future. And that way we can better bridge the gap. But yes, I mean, there are folks that are in there that maybe you're just a little bit more focused on the KPI, and they just want the interview, or they want the pat on the back, they want the name on the board. Um, so I would say if you're going to make it a what would you say, a dichotomy of does do recruiters have my best interest in heart? I think your best option is to look at what incentives does my recruiter have, or do my recruiters have? What kind of business am I dealing with? Have they asked me what my expectations are, or what the business's expectations are? That's kind of the most important part there, is to make sure you know who you're dealing with, gauge how they're gauging you, and gauge, okay, well, what kind of work, what are they actually suggesting for me? What are they trying to get me in the process for? Does it actually match up with what I want, or are they just trying to get me in to interview?
Gotcha. Thanks for that. And then, when you were growing up as a kid, what did you want to be? So let's take you back to second, third,
Yeah.
fourth grade. What'd you dream of doing?
It's funny because I had this conversation with somebody, I think 3 days ago, and I functionally, I don't think I had a job in my mind. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I know I wanted to be a business owner and be independent, but I didn't really have okay, I want to be a marketing guy. I want to be a recruiting guy. I want to be a sales guy. I want to be a whatever. It was more so, I want to have a certain lifestyle. I want to live a certain life. I want to have a certain level of autonomy. And so I never really had a dream job. It was just, I had a dream lifestyle I had in mind, I guess.
And so, you mentioned you talked about your job and everything. What if somebody's out there and they're interested in this type of job? What kind of degree would you recommend, or experience, or anything like that?
I would, a degree is probably, unless you're planning on a plan B or something, a degree is probably not going to help you too much. Maybe if you are, I know plenty of accountants that became accounting recruiters. I know plenty of IT folks that became IT recruiters. So there's something there, but I wouldn't necessarily, hey, go get your accounting degree so you can be an accountant recruiter. What I would say is get with a large firm that has a lot of training and a lot of backing, and have the what would you say? Have the mindset that you're going to be there 2 to 4 years, and then figure out, okay, well, how do I want to pivot from here? Do I want to stay down this very big business, very process oriented lane? Do I want to get with a smaller agency? Do I want to get with a niche agency? Do I want to specialize? I think that a lot of the business comes from simply meeting the metrics over and over and over and over on a weekly basis. If you can get used to doing that, which is literally the hardest part of the job, just knowing that, hey, every day you come in, you got to be productive and you got to get things done. If you can get used to that type of environment on a day-to-day basis, then you'll be able to be successful. It's just a matter of, a lot of these really big businesses do a very good job of holding people to their metrics, making sure that they're making a certain amount of calls, making sure that they're getting a certain amount of introductions. So you'll see on a lot of their, at the same time, you'll see on a lot of their like Glassdoor, I won't name any names, but there's some that they'll have just like all bad reviews, and it'll say, oh man, what a terrible place to work. This place stinks. But you got to think, okay, who's writing these reviews? Are they the people that are meeting the metrics every day, that are beating the metrics every day, that are overperforming? Are they the people that are upset, or do you think it's the people that didn't quite cut it, didn't quite meet the mark on what their expectations were? And anytime I see that controversy or that split, that just makes me believe, okay, this business is more objective on how they're going to treat everybody. They are going to, hold my feet to the fire to make sure I meet certain metrics and make sure I do certain things. This is not a business where I can just kick up my feet for half the day and just hang out and not do anything. It's a tough business. It's a very high activity business. And if you're going into a Fortune 500 company that's a recruiting agency, then, you've got to understand they're running a business. They're expecting you to run at a certain speed and keep up to a certain level. But I think that's what shocks you into being a good recruiter right off the bat. If you can keep up with those metrics, once you go out to a different environment, it feels like you're going in easy mode almost.
I think a part of that, you kind of mentioned it before, you have that kind of sales mentality because, let's face it, during this process, when you've got a couple of candidates picked out for a hiring manager, like you said, they may get down to the third or fourth interview and a candidate may say, James, sorry, I have a better offer over here. And it may just hit you out. I'm sure that's happened to you where it's hit you out of the blue. Somebody's like, well, James, I think I'm just going to stay with my current company. I've decided, and they may be ready to offer, and you've just lost. It's almost like a sale. Somebody's selling a copy machine, and they're about to ink the deal, and the guy's like, well, I think I'll just stay with the copy machine I've got. It's
really like the copying machine gets up and walks away because you're like, damn, I thought we had a deal here, and then the copying machine just sprouts wings and flies away. But yeah, that does happen, and there's just a certain level of ways that you can combat that earlier on in the process. Understanding, talking about the counter offer before an offer shows up, figuring out, hey, making sure that you understand there actually is a reason for this person to change other than, hey, I want $10,000 more, or I want a certain amount more money. If it's something that they like, for example, if it's an opportunity where they're going from being a salesperson to being a sales manager, there's value in that. But if it's a position where they don't really see it as a step up, or if there's not really a chunk of value in them making a change, then that's what happens. And that's why I say, hey, you need to be catching this all before it happens. And after time in the industry, you kind of notice trends in certain actions, and it becomes okay. Well, I know that this can get off the rails, so let me figure out where we really are. Let me double check on our position here and see, hey, is this person really about it, or are they using us to try to get a counter offer from their current employer? Because that happens plenty of times. People will go out, interview just for the sake of getting an offer letter where they say, company B, they said they'll give me 100,000. I gotta leave. I gotta do it unless you guys can meet it. And then they'll say, oh man, okay, we'll meet it. We'll give you 105. We'll give you 110. And so that happens, but you just gotta develop your own little sniff test.
So I got one more question before I get to the audience questions. When you think about recruiting and you think about my show, I talk to hiring managers, I talk to career coaches, I give my advice. I wrote a book on job interviewing. What are the biggest mistakes people are making still out there today as a candidate perspective?
So I think the biggest mistakes are more so missed opportunities than full-on mistakes. So, for example, if you get to the point where you're getting to sit down face-to-face with somebody, you need to do something that's going to set you apart in a bigger way. You need to, and that's why I've got, in other situations, we talk about building a candidate packet and, presenting yourself in a different way than just a resume. Making sure that you're providing references before they even ask for them, making sure that you're giving a specific appeal on that exact job and that exact company where there's no doubt in their mind that this is only for them. But also things as easy as following up after the interview, providing extra information. It's not usually hey, this person was not dressed professionally. It's more so this person just wasn't prepared for this conversation, or they take it as more of they're in the passenger seat instead of being in the driver's seat. So they'll go to the interview, and then they'll interview, and then they won't do anything until that company happens to reach back out. And really what you got to do is, if you want to come off as a serious and motivated candidate for this opportunity, you need to be pushing on your side, because if it's something that you want, then you have to let them know you want it. Obviously, there's a certain degree we want to keep that within, but anything that you want, you need to be actively pushing towards, because those extra steps you take that set you apart, it just shows your professionalism, it shows your forethought, it shows your seriousness. And yes, I think that is like the most common mistakes, is just not taking advantage of simple opportunities to help yourself stand out.
Awesome. I love that too. And, even specifics in the interview, what I advise candidates to do is have a portfolio with you. You don't want to sit there and flip through it the whole time, but if they ask you, give me an example of your leadership experience, wouldn't it be nice to pull out that award to kind of supplement your story? That brings power and more senses to the interview. So, me and you could probably talk about that all day because I'm a career nerd. So, I'm going to move to these questions before we run out of time. So the first question that somebody has is, the student writes in and says, what's the difference between a headhunter and a recruiter?
It's the same thing. It's basically the only difference. Colloquially, the headhunter was the 20 years ago, 30 years ago thing. Some people would say headhunter is also like a 360 recruiter, where, hey, we're not just recruiting, we're developing business as well. But for the most part, 95% of the time, it's the same thing.
The next question comes in, where do you find your candidates?
So you find them basically everywhere. And I know you're going to hate that answer, but we can go through LinkedIn, we can go through Facebook, we can go through data sources. Whenever we talk about looking up company directories, for example, we can do it through third parties, as in, I call you to ask you who you would recommend for XYZ, or, there's a million different ways to do it. Cold targeting through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads. I mean, there's a zillion different ways to do it. Really, how I do it on our searches is, first off, I look at let's say that I'm looking for a window salesperson in Atlanta. First thing I want to do is look at all the window dealers in Atlanta and then figure out, okay, who's working for each one of these dealers. And so whether that means finding them on LinkedIn or literally calling up and asking, who's on the team, or, I thought I talked with a blah, blah, and, can you give me his number back, or whatever it may be. It's more so about creating a market map and then working backwards from there. So it's not, well, and then I guess the one thing I didn't mention is, for active candidates, right? The job boards and candidate databases like Indeed and ZipRecruiter and Career Builder. A lot of times that's not really where we add the most value as a recruiting agency, because most of the time businesses that hire us have already posted the job. They've already checked out some of these areas. That's not really where we go first, but it is a great source for candidates.
Gotcha. Last question comes from a student majoring in HR, says this might be a career pathway that they choose. What are the advantages to recruiting over going into HR?
Depends on your personality. It is, if you're more salesy, if you're more Western gunslinging, boiler room, agency style, then yeah, you want to go into recruiting, you want to go into agency. But there's nothing wrong with, there's been plenty of people that go from an agency to being either a corporate recruiter or being an HR generalist or an HR manager. I just think that there's a lot less paperwork in the agency world. There's a lot less, your meetings are based around different topics. If you like having, I don't know, I guess EEOC meetings, or I don't even know all the SHRM type stuff, to be honest with you. But in my mind, recruiting is such a subset of what human resources does. It's like 10-20% of what they actually do. A lot of their stuff is about compliance and keeping up with their workforce, like employee morale, employee development or talent development. So if you are getting a degree in HR, I would literally base it completely upon your personality. How comfortable are you with getting on the phone with somebody that you've never met before, or calling somebody that isn't expecting your call, or just being in sales? Then I would move you over to, agency and recruiting. But if you're a little bit more, we'll say, they say candidate focused or professional focused, or if you don't like selling at all, or you want to have long-term internal relationships and internal customers instead of external customers, then I would go down the HR route.
Great advice. James, we have a lot of people listening to the show, so maybe just in case somebody's listening that is from your industry, where can they find you? Social media or websites or anything?
Yeah, legacysearch.net. That's our website. I'm also obviously on LinkedIn, right? James Aiken. So yeah, we run a recruiting agency for the building materials industry. So if you have any reason to reach out, I'd love to get introduced.
James, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from this. I've really enjoyed our discussion. I think the audience has really learned a lot too. We've shined a light on recruiting. You did a great job, and we appreciate you joining the show. We know you're very busy, so thank you.
Oh, hey, I appreciate the time, Zach.
Have a great day.
You too.